So good afternoon. We start speaking about arthroscopic guided Latarjet with two buttons this morning. I show you some results. Now we will see some tips and tricks and a video of the procedure. So the objective is to make an arthroscopic Latarjet, and for those of you who don't use this technique, let me show you the different steps, explain which tips and tricks you have for each step. The first step is the coracoid preparation. You have first to clean all the coracoid, as Tom just said, and it's, for me, also the more difficult moment of the surgery. After that, you have to use a burr to prepare the undersurface of the coracoid process, and then you can drill the hole with the specific guide. And I will show you just after what is the good position for this guide. When these things are done, you have to pass the pug button from the front and make the shuttle suture going down. Then you use the south portal to take the first suture from the upper part of the button, and the down suture comes in the north portal. After that, you make the osteotomy of the coracoid, and that's done for the coracoid steps. To do this step, you need a vapor, a shaver with a scope, a 70-degree scope, because with the posterior portal you can see exactly what you want to see from the coracoid process and the medial part. And the good positioning for the specific guide is a medial inclination from 20 to 30 degrees and to be perpendicular to the undersurface you have just prepared before. Tricks easy to follow is that when you are in the right position, you see the medial part of the guide, and also the guide, the exterior part, this part of the guide, is just in front of the nose of your patient. You have to check that you have enough length of the coracoid process, and be careful, because as the specific guide has to be 5 millimeters from the top of the coracoid process. Because after, when you will drill the glenoid, you have to have exactly the same space, which is 5 millimeters. But don't be afraid of that. Everything is in the guide. Another trick you can have for those who are afraid of the rotation is to make the undersurface of the coracoid not exactly flat, but a little bit curved to block the rotation. Personally, I prefer to make it flat. After that, we have the glenoid preparation. We have to detach all the labrum, and then with a burr, we prepare the anterior neck of the glenoid rim. And after that, we drill it at the 5 o'clock position, flush to the glenoid rim. Another tips and tricks for this step, it's easier to do that when you release the capsule from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, because you have a good view of everything, and after it will facilitate your coracoid transfer. And also, if you prepare, if you use a TOTS, which is a temporary outside traction suture, it will be easier for to do your Bankart after. Personally, now, I prepare my Bankart before doing the rest of the surgery. Why? Because when I put my TOTS and then I put my two anchors, one at 3 hours, one at 5 hours, I passed after my TOTS in the 3-hour sutures, and I have a guided positioning for my bone block. If I put the guide between the 3 and 5 o'clock anchors, I'm automatically in the right position, in the subequatorial position. And after that, it will be time winning in the end, when you just have to make the knots for the Bankart. So as I said just before, we have to be 5 millimeters from the down part of the glenoid rim. You have the 10 millimeters more to have a good surface of the coracoid process. And as you can see, the guide is automatically 5 millimeters from the cartilage. Then we have the subscapularis step. We try first to put the posterior spreader in the right position. The right position is again in the 5 o'clock position. And to be sure that you are in the right position, you just have to be parallel to the pin you have in the grenade rim, which is your tunnel. So as you can see in these photographs, the posterior lateral spreader is slid over the posterior blunt with a half-pipe cannula, and after it's pushed through the subscapular, but you don't open it for the moment. You will open it when you will have a scope in the front part of the coracoid process. This is the anterior view after splitting the subscap, and at that time you can make a little subscap release to make it easier after to make the fourth step, which is the coracoid transfer. For the coracoid transfer, we use a suture coming from suture passer from posterior, and then we connect with a PDS on the front and the suture passer, and we pull on this PDS. When the PDS is outside from the posterior portal, you have to stop, retrieve use the pin retriever to retrieve the T-fix pin, because if you pull too much and you come with a suture, the wide suture, you risk to damage it. After that, you put the posterior button, make a nest nut, and start bringing the nut in the right position. You have to pull it not in front of you, but down in the axis, because it's the axis of a tunnel, especially if you are in a bead-shaped position. When you feel the mechanic block, you stop, and then you start putting the tensioner. The tensioner step starts with the anterior scope in front, and you go until you reach 50 Newton pressure. After that, you put your scope in the posterior view, you finalize the positioning of a bone block, and you put the maximum tension. After that, you just have to fix the bankart, which is already prepared, and that's all. So now, let me show you how we do it in real life. So here are the classic portals, the northwest, north, south, east, and west portal. We start with the posterior view. We assess that we have no posterior lesion. We have a Nil-Sachs lesion with a damage in the cartilage. And now we start the preparation. First step, in the northwest portal, with a needle, we have to be able to reach the 5-6 hour position and to be parallel to the subscap tendon. Why? Because if we can't, we will not be able to make the cleaning of the coracoid process in the right space, and also we will not use the burr in the right position. Sometimes, in some people, I prefer to prepare all the step, or make all the cleaning using the west portal, and to do the northwest portal just in the end, to be sure that I will be able to use the burr in the right position. So we clean the lateral part, then the upper part, because it's make easier to have the space below the deltoid and to find the congenital and not damage it. When we have done this step, we put 2 needles again, one on the top of the coracoid process and one medial, to see where the guide will end. After that, we detach the pec minor, like you see in the video. And we go below. You have to be all the time against the bone to be sure that you will not damage the nerves for this step. It's a quite difficult step because it's not usual to be in this place. After that, you make the undersurface of the coracoid process flat. You clean everything, and you put the guide. As you can see, the guide is one in the apex, one lateral, and one medial. You have to be the medial portion of the guide has to be flat, and then you drill the hole. We use the T-fix. T-fix has a male and a female wire, and we let the female wire and pass with a suture passer a PDS. We connect after that the button, pull the button inside, and check that the peg is on the coracoid process. After that, we do the west, south, and east portal. From the south, we retrieve the up the upper suture, and for the north, the down sutures. And after that, osteotomy. End of the first step. Sometimes you have to make a little bit more release after the osteotomy to check that the coracoid process moves easily. Then we go back to the glenoid preparation. We detached all the labrum until to say the subscap fibers, and we detach it from 2 hours to 6 hours. After that, we make the rimming of the glenoid rim to obtain, again, a flat surface in the glenoid rim. Clean everything and control the bleeding. We prepare the Bankart repair. We use a Conmed suture passer which name Spectrum. We do the tuts first. And then we start the positioning of the 2 anchors for the Bankart. The first one is at 5 o'clock. The second one at 3. We use 2 different colors. It will be easier after to manage the suture. And we use the blue one, the upper one, to make a shuttle with the tuts. Now we change the view. We will pass in front view after that. And with a specific guide, which is named half pipe, we put the guide for the glenoid rim. As you can see, the guide is a little bit more down than up, closer to the 5 o'clock position than the 3 o'clock position. In this step, we use, again, the T-fix. Sometimes, if you are in a young guy with a very hard bone, you can use a normal wire before and then use the T-fix. It will be easier for you to pass the bone. After it's time of the splitting, you pass just below the subscap and you block it when you are feeling you are in the just passing the subscap, but you don't open at this time the spreader. Then we go front from the west quarter for the camera, and from the south we begin to clean everything. As I tell you this morning, I start, as we can see here, with checking the rotator interval, find the biceps, then the 3 sisters, and when we follow the 3 sisters, as you can see on the right side, we will find the 2 brothers. Sometimes you have some vessels to bleed, and here you put the retractor to protect the nerves, and as you can see, the spreader is just below the nerves. Then you open the spreader, and now start the split. Be careful when you do the split, because the 70-degree scope gives you a kind of fisheye view, and the risk is to be splitting the subscap in the upper part of the subscap. So you have to check really the round part of the tendon of the subscap and remain just up to the 3 sisters, or you will have a too high level of splitting. When the split is done, you pass the anterior, with the ace portal, the anterior half pipe. You have to pass it medial to the coracoid process, or after it will be difficult for you to put the coracoid process in the right position. You put the anterior spreader, you push on the glenoid rim, pass under the anterior neck of the scapula, and open wide it. And here you can see the wire, the K-wire. Then we start the coracoid transfer. As I said to you just before, we will see from the exterior view that when we have the blue PDS, we retrieve the pin and pass the suture. You can guide the coracoid process with a specific guide or just with a palpator. And you can make a small release of a conjunct tendon if it's a little bit too tight. When you are just positioning in the grenade rim, you block the suture, you pass the button, you make the nice knot. Before doing the tightening the nice knot, you have to check that the sutures are passing well, sliding each other. And then you start to put the tensioner. When you use the tensioner, you have to start 2 or 3 centimeters outside from the skin to begin the tensioning, and after you continue until you reach 50 Newton. Your scope is in front. You can make the release, check the positioning from the front part, and put a little bit more tension. This view is just for you, just for the Congress. We don't do this view normally. It's just to show you from above how is the bone block. And you see that we are below the 3-hour anchor. Then we tie the bone cord, and after that we'll do 3 surgeon knots, and that's all. This is the initial technique of Mr. Boileau. Personally, I prefer to do my 3 surgeon knots before and finish the bone cord after, so I can check that everything is okay before making my bone block extra-articular. That's all. And for those who think that this technique is a technique made by Pascal Boileau for Pascal Boileau, only from Pascal Boileau, and that nobody can do it except Pascal Boileau, let me show you a patient of mine with a result at 6 weeks post-ops. Here are the X-rays and the CT, and the result at 6 weeks in the clinics. So as you can see, we have good external rotation, good mobility, a little bit of a lack of internal rotation at that time, and we almost don't see the arthroscopic portals in the skin. Thank you very much.